Hello and welcome back to the Dire Gentleman channel. My name is Guso Milcarella.
And my name is, I don't know any, iceberg film puns that I could make of my name, but, we're watching something bad today, or I did.
Yeah, I'm hearing secondhand about a movie called Taxidermia, which sounds special.
It is a very special movie. Now, I have this letterbox list that is called Movies I Love But Cannot in Good Faith Recommend to Anyone. And as soon as I finished watching Taxidermia, I put it straight on that list. This is one of those movies that I think it's on, Weirdo Watch List, which is one of my favorite letterboxed lists. It's where I get, all of my movies
the classic.
now. It was on there, and I was very, morbidly intrigued by it, but it was one of those things where it's okay, I know that this is going to be one of the grossest movies I've ever seen. So I had to spend 2 or 3 months hyping myself up before I actually sat down and watched it. You know, everybody's heard of the Serbian film, everybody's heard of Martyrs, all of these, what we in the Dire Gentleman inner circle call Hoyneficker movies.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Which is a reference to an elaborate bit that we have about this, fictional, disgusting European movie about a guy who fucks chickens.
It's his job. He takes
it's
no
his job.
joy
He's
in
a humble
it.
chicken fucker. Henry just said it's our iceberg Goncharov.
I personally like the detail that, his only source of food in the European country that he's in is his own illegitimate children. From the chickens, obviously.
From the chickens. Interestingly, something similar to that happens in this movie. I'll get into it. But, people have heard of all of these, famous, gross European art movies that sort of had a boom in the 2000s. And this movie is from 2006, so this is definitely part of that whole trend and genre. I mean, you got the New French Extremity. I don't know what they call it in other countries, but there's definitely, a tradition of disgusting art movies from Europe.
The way you described this to me initially, putting me up to speed with what this video would be about, you said that it's one of those European shock movies, but through the story structure of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
Yeah, it is a weird, gross live action Hungarian JoJo's.
Yeah, because it takes place over 3 generations.
Yeah,
of
it's
this
3
family,
generations
right?
of a family. Although that gets a little muddy. It is a movie that has a lot to say about, obviously the most kind of evident theme is generational trauma and Hungarian national identity and the way that the system grinds you down. It's kind of depressing, but weirdly beautiful in a way, in a way that a movie with this many dick shots should not be. It's baffling.
Okay, so what occurs in Taxidermia?
Okay, so it starts off with you've got a black screen with all of the names of the actors on it, and you have somebody giving a speech in Hungarian with a British woman translating it. Because they're kind of talking over each other and there were no subtitles on this part, because they just assumed you'd be able to understand the translator, even though her and the Hungarian woman do kind of talk over each other at some points. I wrote down the quote because it's sort of ties in the theme of creativity and trauma and how it all ties in together. This unseen person is giving a speech and says, if it weren't for me, nobody would know about this. It wouldn't exist. Nobody would know who Lyoska Balatoni was, or who his parents were, or what he was like. And then it cuts to a guy holding a candle and kind of going in he's gonna eat the flame, going in with his mouth, and then he's kind of fucking around with the candle, and then fire is coming out of his penis.
Right, okay.
And this man is a man named Morozgovani. This section is set in the 1940s. Hungary was, I think, fascist. Morozgovani is the lowest ranking member of this military outfit. He's the kind of the personal assistant of the general who lives on a farm with his family. And Morozgovani basically just has to do all the dirty work. He has to shovel the land. He has to, look after the farm animals. He has to, build the new outhouse or whatever. He's always got some menial task he has to do. And he's a deeply lonely man, and he's also a huge pervert who is constantly having these incredibly surreal, vivid sexual fantasies. This is the most interestingly shot part of the movie because Morozgovani has such a tenuous grip on reality. So it'll just become a pop-up book for a second, and there'll be weird shots. There's this like kind of big bathtub thing that he chops up pork meat in, but there's this incredible shot where the bathtub is like turning around and it's showing all of the things that this bathtub is used for. So it's like flips over and it's like the general's wife is taking a bath, and it flips over again and there's like they're having a funeral and there's a dead body in it, and then it flips over again and there's like somebody making bread. It's basically just showing the passage of like several years through this bathtub flipping over, and like different people. I don't know if it's a bathtub. It looks like a bathtub. It's just like a vessel, a trough of some sort. That's such a cool way of showing the passage of time. It's awesome. It's a really cool shot, and I have no idea how they did it, but it looks amazing. And then there's another shot where he opens up a pop-up book and it like zooms into the pop-up book, and it's become this sort of beautiful like Charles Dickens Victorian street. So Moroz Gavani is just this like lonely man who's acting out his weird sexual fantasies because he has like no meaningful human contact in his life, and he lives in this repressive society, and he has this boss that's constantly giving him orders. So he just subjugates it into his like sexual fantasies, and so they get really weird. There's a lot to be said about a movie that opens with a guy shooting fire out of his dick.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, so he fucking things with his fire dick?
Well, he's imagining that he has a fire dick.
Oh, okay, that's one of the fetishes.
That's one of the, like, little disgusting flights of fancy that he goes on. And another one, which leads into, I think, one of cinema's greatest perfectly cut screams. He is cleaning the chicken coop. He's on the inside of the chicken coop and cleaning it, with all the chickens kind of, like, running around him.
This would be the video we bring up to Heinefucker, by the way. This would be the exact one.
It basically happens, for real. And he is watching the general's daughters, who are like older teenagers. They're having a snowball fight in the yard, and he's watching them from inside the chicken coop, and he becomes so aroused that he immediately like finds kind of like a weird notch in the wood and like puts bacon grease on it and turns it into a glory hole. And he puts his dick in the hole, and then on the other side of the wall, a chicken walks up to him, looks at his dick for a little bit, like watches it go in and out of the hole, and then just like pecks the end of it, and he screams, and the scream is cut off at like the funniest time. It cuts from him screaming in pain to the mother of the two girls calling them inside for dinner, and the edit is seamless comedy.
I think that, like, there's no way that couldn't have gone wrong for him, because, like, let's think about this for a second.
What if you got a splinter in your wee-wee?
It's already cold enough for there to be snow, so exposing yourself, bad temperature, frostbite dick, you could get splinter dick, the bacon grease could give you dick pimples, and then chicken bite dick.
But
all bad things happen to dick.
But, like, this guy is such a coomer that he doesn't even think of that. He's just immediately like, R.I.P. Moroz Gavani, you would have loved the Monster Girl wiki.
Oh my god, yeah. He probably would have been turned on by the idea of a chicken monster girl after that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that is not his only, like, sexual encounter with livestock in this movie. So one of his things that he has to do is he has to, like, slaughter and butcher the pigs. There's a scene where he's about to kill one of the pigs, and he's, like, singing to it to calm it down before he slits its throat. And then he starts cutting it up, and then at one point, he goes into his, like, pop-up book world, and he has this, like, weird sex dream about, getting this, like, haunted Victorian doll looking child to jack him off. It's not explicit, thank God. It's all it's all kind of like, here, give me your hand, and then hard cut to him laying in bed wanking. So, this guy is just the biggest coomer in the world.
I also love the idea that, like, in the 1940s, like, without real internet porn, this guy's just creating, like, niche fetish internet porn.
Yeah, he's inventing them in his mind. And it really says a lot about our society.
If they put his brain into a hard drive, they could have, like, created the internet.
And that brain in a jar? Kenku Cross.
Kenku Cross.
No, so he later is like, he's up late working in the shed where he does the butchering of the food animals, and he's like cutting up this pig into like different cutlets. You know, he's got like the ribs and I'm not a butcher, I don't know the names of the cuts of meat, but he's just got this like big thing of like pork that he's just chopped up. And then his boss's wife comes in and, is like, oh, I see the way you look at me. I'm sick of my husband. I gotta get away from him. And I think, I'm trying to remember if this is before or after the cunt makes the world go around speech that the boss gives him.
What?
Like, the boss gives him, like in like war movies or like, movies where they'll have like the hyper masculine like general character who just like talks about fucking a lot.
Yeah.
So the guy, while Moros Gavani is chopping wood, his boss is just like, the one thing that motivates, like, it's the thing that men go to war for, and the thing that, inspires the poets, and, it's why we all get up in the morning is pussy. Call it what you like, but cunt makes the world go round. And Moros Gavani is just, like, so true. And then that night, I think his boss's wife comes in and seduces him.
How much convincing did she really need to do to seduce this man? Because it seems like
no, I mean,
it's
basically he just comes in. She just comes in as just like UTTF, and he's like, always.
I was gonna fuck this meat I just cut up.
Yeah, here's where it gets interesting. She lays down on top of the meat and is just like, give it to me. Just give it to me, Moros Gavani. My husband's a cuck. Like, this is the most interestingly shot and edited part of the film because it sort of represents how Moros Gavani's horniness is just degrading his brain.
Right.
So, as he's fucking, like, every time the camera, like, pans over his back, and every time it goes from, like, one side to his side, it's a different woman.
Ah.
So it's, like, sometimes it's the daughter, sometimes it's, like, as she's, like, coming, her voice becomes, like, pig squealing. You realize that he's actually just been, like, jerking it into the uncooked pork. And his boss catches him, pants fully off, butt out, dick out, and the boss waits about 2 seconds before shooting him. In the head.
Shit. Okay. I mean, at least he didn't go full Black Mirror before like he had his way out.
It's kind of like 1 degree removed. It's kind of like just like a sad 1940s Hungarian peasant version of like American Pie.
No, it is a shame, though, that this man does not actually come fire, because if they let him near the meat with his fire dick, they'd probably be able to, like cook a lot more food.
Oh my god, that'd be amazing. That'd be an amazing power.
Exactly. Fire dick man.
So, it cuts from Moros Gavani's head exploding.
That was our Phantom Blood. That was like part 1, Jonathan Joestar. I imagine the bloodline goes on in some way because that man has distributed his semen just about everywhere, right?
But the interesting thing is that the wife of the general does give birth to a baby, and the baby has a pig's tail.
What occurred?
Like, was he so horny that he impregnated her?
With his fantasy?
With his dream. Is he the Freddy Krueger of nut?
Is he like Hungarian Zeus? Like in the form of a pig fucking dream, he can impregnate somebody.
Yeah, so the baby with the pig's tail grows up to be Kalaman Balatoni, who is a champion speed eater. And so now we move forward to the 60s. Hungary is communist at this point. So Kalaman is in this like beans and aspic and like other gross Eastern European food eating contest with another guy named Bela, and I don't remember what his last name is. Him and Bela are like rivals. This is when it becomes a sports anime for a hot second.
Obviously, this is Joseph Joestar and Caesar Zappelli. This is, taxidermia battle tendensidermia.
Yeah, this is the tournament arc of Hungarian JoJo's. So, and Bela and Kalaman are both interested in this girl called Giselle, who is another speed eater. They're in a love triangle, and they're all trying to get to like the big international competition. And I think in Norway, but they can only send one person from the men's team. I think Giselle is going to be representing the women's team, but then from the men's team, it's got to be between Kalaman and Bela. And in this competition where he's eating the beans and shit, Kalaman's jaw suddenly like involuntarily clenches and locks up, so he's got this spoon stuck in his mouth.
Woo!
And everybody,
Like, forever?
everybody's like losing it because this is like the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in the Hungarian speed eating circuit. Giselle comes to visit him in the hospital, and Bela comes to visit him in the hospital, and his coach comes to visit him, and his coach is like, "Oh, that's a piss poor performance out there. You're gonna have to do better than that." Then I think Bela ends up going to the like international competition. Then it kind of cuts forward, and Giselle and Kalaman are getting married. Bela and Giselle sneak off to go have sex like the second she's been married, like the second after, and they're literally like outside the like whatever the Hungarian equivalent of like the lawn bowls club. It's just that kind of like shitty 60s communal building.
Right, where like the kind of lame after party is going
Yeah, it's
on.
like the rec center or the bowls club or something, and they're having the wedding party, and they like Bela and Giselle go outside, and he is like hitting it from the back, and she's up against the wall, like they can't see her from inside, but she's like looking in on the wedding party, and Kalaman is like, "I'm gonna fucking kill him," and all of his friends are like pulling him back. I'm like, no, you can't do that. Don't ruin your wedding night by like getting into a brawl with this guy. You know, he's your best friend, and it's kind of like
the wedding night's already ruined.
Yeah,
the wedding night
his
is
night's
already
been
ruined.
But like, he doesn't know that they're having sex. He just suspects. But all his friends are like, nah. Jizzy is gonna be. They call her Jizzy.
Not Freudian at all.
Very keeping in the theme of the movie that her name has the word jizz in it. Anyway, so like, oh no, she'll be faithful to you. She loves you. You know, like start. Get up on the stage and start singing. And he gets up and he starts singing the song, and Giselle outside is like, "Oh, I'm making a mistake. I shouldn't be doing this." And so she leaves Bela and goes back to her husband, and they go on their honeymoon together. They're able to get off work because I imagine in the communist times, if you wanted to go on a honeymoon, you had to fill out like a bunch of forms and like get them all stamped by the right guys. It was probably but they finally get like permission to go on their honeymoon. They go to somewhere where there's water. I don't know, like Sweden or Estonia or somewhere.
Water country, obviously.
The sun is blazing and the summer gets hot. Water country's a very cool spot.
I write a show that's set in Europe, and I can't picture the layout.
When the sun is blazing and the summer gets hot, summer country is a very watery spot.
Okay.
Water country, water country, water country.
So they end up on they're on their honeymoon. They go to like the carnival together, and it's really cute. Like at this point, Giselle's found out that she's pregnant. So they're like really cute together. They're like feeding each other donuts and being like, "Oh, these are the baby names that we should pick." And this is the most normal this movie will ever be.
It's at its most normal when it is the like wedding aftermath of a shonen battle series about speed eating. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
They end up on this boat because I think that like some people that they know from work or like some have some like visiting foreign dignitaries on a boat, and they're having like this boat party, and they somehow get invited onto the boat, and they're like, "Oh yeah, do a demonstration. Show them how good the Hungarian champion speed eaters are." And so they end up having to eat all of this stuff, and then Giselle gets really sick.
Oh no.
And she like passes out in the food. They take her back to the hospital, and I think she has to like retire from the sport for her health. Kalaman's performance starts to go downhill. So his coach gives him the big like, the like, "Oh, you've lost your fire. You used to be such a, like that kind of the sports anime. Like you got to go back, and because if you can't pull yourself out of this rut, we're going to have to send Bela." And then Kalaman goes off. He's like, "That motherfucker, Bela. Oh, everybody, Bela. Oh, fuck that guy." And then he has this little moment where he's talking about like how he realized that he wanted to be a competitive speed eater, which is that like he went to a chocolate factory when he lived in the same town as a chocolate factory when he was a kid. And one day like the machine broke down. So there was a bunch of like busted chocolate pieces that couldn't go to market. Owner of the chocolate factory was like, "Hey, local kids, come here. Come and eat as much as you can before it all melts and goes bad." So he was able to eat the most out of everybody. And it ended up like impressing this girl that he like a girl in the town that he had a crush on. And his quote that he has is like, I wanted to show her I was good at something, that there are other things you can be good at other than rope climbing and singing. And that was when he realized that he had a talent of being able to eat a lot of food.
Yeah, it's being good at eating a lot of food is his love language.
It's his love language. And also typical shonen protagonist trait.
If anything, this is like streamlining the shonen protagonist down to his most essential element, is that he was born in some weird supernatural way, and he likes eating a lot of food, and he has a rival, and he has a love interest. That's it. That's all you need. He's basically Naruto, but like with a pig inside of him instead of a fox.
Pretty much. So, Giselle gives birth to kind of a sickly little baby. And they're worried about him because I guess, like, because they're both speed eaters, they want their child to go into the family business, but they're like, oh, this weedy little guy. Well, we'll have to take good care of him, hope he gets a bit bigger as he gets older. He doesn't. He grows up to be Lyoshka, who you may remember that name as being mentioned in the opening monologue of this movie. This is now in the 2000s. The capitalist times. Lyoshka is a taxidermist, and he still lives with his dad. Kalaman has become like... You remember Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite?
Yeah.
Older Kalaman reminds me of just like a really like fat version of him. Because he's like, I gotta say, the fat suit in this movie sucks. He looks like a Muppet.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
He looks like some kind of, like, rubber animatronic. He looks incredibly fake. He's, like, gigantically fat now, and he's confined to a wheelchair, and he spends all of his day watching old recordings of his old matches and other competitive speed eating competitions, and he spends all of his time, like, going on about, like, I used to be somebody. I could have been the greatest in the sport if my bitch ex-wife hadn't left me. And you see on the TV that Giselle is now the coach of, like, America's greatest speed eater.
Uh-huh.
So something happened between them. I guess they broke up because, I don't know, maybe they had a paternity test and found out that Lyoshka is actually Bela's son.
Oh, man.
Lyoshka is taking care of his dad because his dad just kind of like is like wallowing and eating himself to death. And he has these 3 cats that he feeds butter. I don't really know why that was there other than to just be weird.
They can't eat those, right?
Yeah, well,
like,
the cats are really
not good with
aggressive
butter.
because they never get proper food.
Oh, so they're just like, they've gone feral. They're like, stop feeding us butter, Dad.
So Kalaman and Lyoshka, like, hate each other, and there's a lot of, like, implied subtext of, like, number one, he wanted to be a taxidermist, which is, like, that's a weird hobby. That's not a respectable line of business, like being a competitive speed eater. And also, like, he's illegitimate, you know, he's a result of an affair.
That's also true of Kalaman. Like, Kalaman's, like, literally, like, a almost cross-species, like, neurological affair. Like, he basically shouldn't exist.
The thing with Kalaman is that, like, Moros Gavani was, like, killed immediately after Kalaman was conceived, so I can imagine that, like, the General Balatoni, who raised Kalaman as his own son, was just like, yeah, I'm never telling him that happened.
Yeah. I just think it's, like, dramatically ironic.
That would traumatize him if he found out that his biological father was, like, some kind of pervert pig wizard.
Yeah. Your biological father was a pig wizard who used, like, pig voodoo magic to fuck meat and fuck my wife at the same time through dream-like magic.
It's a lot. So, Lyoshka is, like, he makes these really weird little taxidermy things. Like his creations are insane. They are like Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of like Fiji mermaid shit, a lot of it, but it's very good. So he's good at what he does. He's very passionate about what he does, but his dad doesn't understand his dream. And so he spends most of his time going to the store and buying candy bars that his dad just eats. This is a movie that's like weird about fat people.
It sounds
but
like
that was
it.
the 2000s.
It sounds like it.
Everyone was weird about fat people in 2006. It comes with the territory. But anyway, so Lyoshka, like, his only companion is the lady at the checkout. And he keeps like trying to be like, so what do you do after you get off shift? And she just like blanks him every time. She's like, you know, like, as you should, because it's inappropriate to try and chat someone up while they're working. So she'll just be like, yeah, 385, leave. So he has no human connection in his life. And then one day he comes home from the gym and the cats have gotten loose. And, like, I guess that Kalaman had a heart attack, and then the cats started eating him.
Okay, yeah. So finally, they get revenge for the butter eating.
Yeah, now that his dad is dead, first of all, he taxidermizes his dad. But then he taxidermizes himself with this, like, he gets into this, like, weird steampunk contraption with, like, pistons and stuff. And it taxidermizes him. But like earlier in the movie, he did an order for like a really rich local surgeon who was also like a patron of the arts, who was supposed to come around and pick something up from the taxidermy studio. So this rich guy comes around to the studio and sees that Lyoshka has basically like turned himself into like a meat version of one of those headless Roman sculptures. So he's in there in kind of like a contrapposto pose, head gone, dick out, taxidermized.
He's a genius if he could make a machine that can do that.
Yeah.
How did this happen? Like, I would more readily believe in the logic of this film that he used dream magic to make himself a taxidermy.
Listen, so the movie ends with the rich guy is the guy at the beginning being like, yeah, without me, nobody would have known of the genius of Lyoshka Balatoni, you know, who has, you know, created this bold statement about, you know, society and preservation of memory by taxidermizing his dad and himself. And it's like at a gallery open with all these rich people around, like drinking champagne. And the movie ends with the taxidermized Lyoshka sort of standing on a pedestal like Michelangelo's David. That's taxidermia.
Right, okay. So from weird pervert pig wizard man to speed-eating shonen battle to taxidermy that results in like taxidermy suicide transformation. Would you care to elucidate what all of this really means?
So first of all, I would like to say that before this video there's probably been like 50,000 trigger warnings at the beginning because this is one of the fucking weirdest things I've ever seen. But I would like to say something in defense of watching uncomfortable media and consuming things that make you uncomfortable. I'm not saying go out and like find things that'll trigger yourself, but I'm saying that like one of my biggest triggers is seeing other people throw up. And there is a lot of that in the shonen speed eating arc. There's a lot of people making themselves throw up, which for a variety of reasons, huge trigger for me. But because I knew it was in the movie, I was able to like, okay, this is coming. Just look at the subtitles. Don't look at the rest of the screen. You know, like, so I think that like, I think a lot of people treat trigger warnings as like being akin to allergy warnings where it's like, yeah, I can't eat this because there's peanuts in it. And if I eat a peanut, I'll die. So I must never eat a peanut. Whereas I think it's more like a life preserver or a condom. It's just something that you have, you know, something that you keep in your back pocket that protects you.
Yeah, it's inviting you to take precautions when you, like, you know, go into this.
If you know that there is triggering material in a piece of media, you can engage with it without it, you know, hurting you because you know what's coming. And, I've always been a believer in that because I have this I have this irrational fear of sharks because my parents took me on the Jaws ride at Universal Studios when I was like 5 years old. And ever since then I've been afraid of sharks, even though I know in my mind, in my logical brain, that shark attacks are a statistical anomaly. But I know that the only way I will ever be able to cure myself of a fear of sharks is if I see a shark in the wild and survive the encounter. This is a little bit like that. It's like, yeah, vomit is a trigger for me, but if I know it's coming and I'm prepared for it and it doesn't kill me, I'll be fine.
Yeah, it's exposure therapy.
You know, obviously respect your own, like know when you're ready. Make sure that you're in the right mindset. Make sure that you've prepared yourself. But I definitely recommend going outside your comfort zone and consuming media that you think like, oh, that's too gross. That's too, like, that's got topics in it that make me feel uncomfortable. There is some great art out there that is like, you know, like outside of your comfort zone. If you only consume stuff that is comfortable, brain atrophies. You become intellectually stunted.
And especially if you want to also create art, you need to be able to draw from like not just your favorite media and not just media that everybody enjoys, but stuff that you never would have looked at if you weren't trying to expand your horizons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, you know, and that's not just about triggering material, though I do believe like everything you said on that tracks. It's also just about like, if there's a genre you think you're like, oh, I'm not that into that genre, try some of it out. Maybe you'll find something that surprises you. And even if you don't like it as a whole, you might still find a piece of something that you can add to what you're making, or just your understanding of art in general.
Like I was saying, like probably the most disgusting part of this movie, which is the beginning with fucking Moroz Gavani's sexcapades. That is some of the most like interesting editing and filming I've seen in a movie recently. And you know, if I had completely written off Taxidermy as just like, oh, that movie's gross, I'm not gonna watch it, I never would have seen that bathtub shot, which is awesome.
Yeah. No, the really unique way that they like showed the passage of time at the beginning.
Anyway, now to answer your question, I'm gonna sort of go into what I think it all means.
All right, break it down for the viewers at home.
First of all, there's like, I've seen this sentiment like echoed a lot in reviews of this movie, both on Letterboxd and also Cal Calgren did a really good like breakdown of this movie. You know, it's about sort of like the futility of personal identity as resistance. Because it's like, on the one hand, you have, you know, Moroz Gavani lives in like a fascist state. So he rebels by being the world's worst pervert.
He is degeneracy incarnate.
Kalaman lives in a socialist society, so he takes up this sport that basically is the representation of, like, excess. And then Lyoshka lives in a capitalist society, and he ends up turning himself into a product.
Yeah, so in every single case, these guys engage in a self-destructive act that on some level feels like, oh, well, this could really shake up the status quo, but it really only is their own destruction.
That is, I think, the central theme of the movie, but because other people have talked about it, like I said, Cal Calgren's talked about that specific theme a lot in his video. I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but I am going to tell you something that I thought is sort of more on theme with this channel, where I think that this movie also has a lot to say about like what it means to like what is having a healthy relationship with your creative output. If you take all of the many hobbies and interests of this movie and sort of like take them as metaphor for you know, being a writer, being a filmmaker,
practicing a craft, yeah,
like a craft. So you have Moroz Gavani, who his only form of creativity is creating these elaborate sex fantasies, and the only thing, and he does that as sort of like a balm to his soul because he's so lonely. But what it ends up doing is just like rotting his brain and making him like unable to tell the difference between fantasy and reality, which is why he dies. Kalaman, like, he has that whole thing about like, yeah, the getting the buzz, like figuring out that this was my talent and realizing it was my calling. And like, he has a love for the sport, but it ends up becoming his whole identity, to the point that he is just like sad and divorced and like just sits and watches TV all day and like criticizes other people for doing what he used to. He can't fathom the fact that like when you make one thing your entire personality, if that one thing goes belly up, where are you? What are you?
And also, like, it does just, like, really strike me as this idea that, like, people are, like, getting into art for the wrong reasons by being like, well, if I'm not the absolute best, then what's the point?
Yeah.
If you're doing it for the love of it, you should just matter, like, what you've put into it and what you're getting out of it. Not, like, whether or not you're at the top of, like, the hierarchy or the food chain, as it were.
Yeah. And then Lyoshka, who, you know, he is so, like, dedicated to his craft that he uses it as a form of suicide. Of just like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna end up like my sellout dad. Because, like, the thing with the speed eating is it's, like, it's state-sponsored. It is propaganda. Lyoshka is like, yeah, I'm not gonna be a fucking sellout for the man like my stupid fat dad. I'm gonna make stuff that matters. I'm gonna put a ferret head on a duck, and then I'm gonna kill myself.
Yeah, no. It's like when people like view all art as a product of like, capitalism, which it isn't. And that's like a very dangerous notion to get into, that like people wouldn't be doing art if we lived in a moneyless society. I think they would be doing art if we lived in a moneyless society. But there's no reason why doing an unsuccessful art that doesn't make you money should be so strenuous on you that you like to spite the rest of the world, destroy yourself with it.
But and the thing is, and the fucked up thing is that Lyoshka is basically rewarded for this, because in death he becomes famous as this like sort of Damien Hirst-esque transgressive artist who died for his craft, and everybody's like at the gallery opening like clapping and like, oh wow, he was a genius. He was such a tortured genius.
And it's similar to some sentiments we were talking about in the menu. The way that like tortured geniuses are often rewarded for like, going against the status quo, or being so like torn up by their art and by the world that they like, they hurt themselves and they like, hurt their loved ones. And then like at the end of the day, it's like, if that's all celebrated, that's just capital recuperating all of those feelings and making them null.
I'm also like amused by the fact that this like rich guy at the end is like bigging up his like nobody would have heard of this kid if I hadn't found his headless taxidermized dick out ass out body in the basement of this taxidermy shop. Like he's like, yeah, and I discovered him, and you reward me because the guy is dead, obviously, so you can't materially reward him, but reward the rich guy who found the dead body.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because in all three cases, like the authorities of that time are the ones who like went out. Like in the first guy's time, literally that like he gives the general a child. In the second one, it's like Speed Eating the sport probably got way more famous, way better for having, these players that were really good and competitive in it, but it just moved on without him, left him behind. And then this last one, it's as you said, like, this rich guy gets all the credit for this person's very sad life.
Yeah. It is that peculiar, like, Europeanness of, like, it's both really kind of absurd, but also, like, if you think about it at all, it's depressing as hell.
Definitely feels like one of those things that it's just like, man, sometimes things can continue to go wrong for an entire family for generations.
This is a comment left by a Hungarian person on Kyle Kalgren's video about taxidermia. It is really hard to get funding for movies. After the Soviet system, Hungarian filmmaking went downhill really fast. We had a company which owned all the sound stages, had a reliable crew for both TV and movie productions, but by the early 2000s, even the last parts of it were all gone. So this movie, I think, on some way, is the director's, like, venting his frustration about the ways that you have to kind of, like, twist yourself into these positions and, like, sacrifice things for your art, and being like, yeah, in this capitalist system, I basically had to, you have to sell an arm and a leg to get film funding anymore because, there's no government grants.
I totally can see that.
And I definitely relate to that as somebody from a country with like a small kind of garbage film industry. I definitely relate to that. I feel like anybody who's a creative who lives in a country that's not America probably feels like that, because it's just like, yeah, all of these movies. It is so true that, like, the movies that are made outside of America that get big press are always the ones that are, like, really fucked.
Yeah, exactly. Either that or it's just something that, like, it got so popular that suddenly it counts as, like, a real movie to the Academy.
Yeah, because, like, it's speaking as an Aussie, like, the movies that people have heard of that have come out of Australia, there's, people don't talk about, like, I don't know, Muriel's Wedding or, like, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert as much as they talk about, like, Wolf Creek and The Nightingale and The Babadook, like...
Yeah, no, it's true.
I think American audiences, I'm going to speak in broad generalizations, so don't come at me if you're offended by this. I think American audiences like to have their worldview of the rest of the world being kind of like weird and gross reaffirmed.
No, you're right. Do you think that, like, in some ways, Taxidermia is, like, playing into this sort of...
Absolutely, I think it is. Because this movie would have been made a couple years... Was it made... I'm going to look up when a Serbian film was made. And I'm also going to look up when Hostel was made. A Serbian film, 2010. So this was before a Serbian film. Hostel was the year before, though. So this might have been... Like, Hostel is another, like... whoa, the Eastern European people, kind of.
Yeah. No, this strikes me as, like, be xenophobic at us and be entertained at the same time.
Yeah.
And in a way, it, like, if you, like, take it at that surface level, like, I can get why it would have gotten a lot of press just for the sheer audacity. But if you think about that intention behind the movie and think about what befalls the characters in the movie, you're like, oh, this film perfectly succeeded at its artistic vision.
Yeah. And that is the thing. Like, if you think it's a good movie or not, whatever. But it's definitely a movie that set out to make a statement, and by God, did they make it.
The one thing I gotta say is that after seeing that, I'm not Hungary.
No. No, God.
Sono chivo sarame. Taxidermia!